A gate appeared on my land overnight. The HOA's name was on the sign. Ethan Walker had spent 20 years protecting his land from people who assumed money could buy just about anything. So when a sheriff's deputy showed up at his private lake one afternoon with a trespassing warning, it didn't just surprise him. It made no sense at all. The HOA was claiming he was trespassing on their property. He knew every inch of that shoreline, every fence post, every trail worn down the water over decades. Lately, though, strangers had started showing up around the lake like they had every right to be there. Then he found a reason why. A brand new gate blocking his own access road, no permission asked, and a sign bolted to it carrying the HOA's name. When he confronted them, nobody apologized. He was told the road now fell under HOA control, and he'd need authorization to use it. Ethan looked at the gate for a long moment and asked one question. "Show me the deed." The next morning, HOA President Victoria Hayes showed up in person, talking like the lake had always been hers to manage. According to her, Ethan was violating community access rules. He almost laughed. He'd never joined their community in his life. He said his original deed on the hood of his truck. Decades old, but the legal description couldn't have been clearer. The land under the HOA's precious access road belonged to him. In writing. On record. That's when the sheriff arrived. Victoria had called it in, framing Ethan as a troublemaker. Sheriff Daniel Reed stepped out, and Ethan didn't flinch. He just handed over the deed. Reed read through it, then unfolded a survey map and lined up against the gate behind them. His expression shifted. The access road was inside the HOA's boundary. Neither was the lakefront strip. According to the original survey, some of the community's newest additions sat squarely on Ethan's land. Victoria insisted the HOA had bought the property years back. There had to be another document proving it. Reed told her that might be true, but until it surfaced, Ethan's deed was the strongest thing on the table. Her confidence started to wobble. What the ground remembered. That night, the HOA board dug through years of files hoping to prove Ethan wrong. Every document they opened just made things worse. Eventually, they hit an old survey predating the neighborhood entirely. Original boundaries, precise and unambiguous. The community had been built around Ethan's land, and somewhere along the way, the boundary lines had been quietly redrawn by someone who'd approved it without much scrutiny. Ethan spent that evening going through everything his father had left him and found a name he hadn't seen in years, a land company that vanished decades ago after a failed plan to build a private lakeside resort. Construction never finished. The company disappeared. The next morning, he followed an old map into the woods and found it. An unfinished concrete foundation buried under years of overgrowth. The company's name still carved into it. Nearby, half swallowed by the forest floor, sat an original survey marker, positioned exactly where the historic map said the boundary belonged. Proof the land had never legally changed hands. Someone had just acted like it had. He called Reed again. This time the reaction was different. The sheriff recognized a marker from the county's old survey archive. Wherever those boundary records had been altered, it wasn't a clerical accident. It was a real legal problem. Before Ethan could figure out his next move, Victoria got a call of her own. A private attorney had turned up something worse. The original land purchase agreement specifically excluded lakefront access. It had never been part of the deal. Word spread fast. Residents who'd paid a premium for waterfront access started wondering what exactly they'd bought. Some blamed Ethan. Others started asking why the board had never bothered to check the original records before selling homes on the promise of a lake they didn't own. For the first time, neighbors approached Ethan on their own, without Victoria running interference. Not angry, just looking for answers. He gave them the plain truth. He never wanted their houses or their money. He wanted his own land respected. Nothing more. Then, that same night, someone tried to bury the truth again. A new survey marker turned up near the shoreline. Unofficial, unrecorded, planted directly on Ethan's property. The next morning, fresh tire tracks showed up in the mud. Somebody had driven out there overnight. Reed photographed the scene and told Ethan plainly. This wasn't just a boundary dispute anymore. This looked deliberate. The two of them went straight to the county archive and requested every historical document tied to the lake. Hours in, the clerk pulled a file that had been sealed for over 30 years. Inside was a missing piece. The original purchase agreement, confirming the lake and its access land had never been sold to the HOA's predecessor. And tucked in with it, a handwritten note naming the person who'd requested the boundary change. It traced back to a former developer connected to the neighborhood's original construction, someone who'd apparently redrawn the lines to make the community look bigger on paper than it actually was. Ethan's family land had simply been in the way. He brought the evidence to the clubhouse. Victoria looked it over and finally understood the scale of what had happened. The gate, the access road, the lakefront restrictions, all of it built on a boundary that had never legally existed. Ethan had every right to shut the whole thing down on the spot. He didn't. Instead, he offered residents a fair path forward, one that protected his ownership while not punishing families who bought in without knowing any better. For the first time, the neighborhood understood he'd never been the villain in this. Weeks later, the unauthorized gate came down for good, replaced by a legal agreement that finally matched the truth on paper. The road was his, and everyone who'd once tried to gatekeep it now had to answer to the man who actually held the deed. The lake went quiet again. Ethan's boundaries were restored, official and undisputed, and there was no pretending otherwise anymore. He didn't celebrate the win so much as just stand by the water, glad the record finally matched reality. If there's one thing the whole ordeal taught him, it's this. Ownership means nothing if you don't actually know what you own. The HOA had tried to claim his land, his road, and his lake,